My name is Randie, and I have been a Baha'i for 50 years, which is hard to believe because I'm only 29. So I grew up in a white middle-class neighborhood of Los Angeles, a suburb of Los Angeles. I was a suntanned California girl with a slight greenish tint to my waist-length blonde hair, which came about because I was also a competitive swimmer, and the chlorine turned my hair green, so I was a little bit strange looking. The most important things in my life by the time I got to high school were volleyball, and at the time I was trying out for the US national team, which I played on for about a year later on, and also wood design, which was my major in college, and also boys, or rather one in particular. And the thought of God never entered my mind. In 1970, after a year of college, my boyfriend at the time, Steve, who is now my husband, asked me to marry him. And I said, no, I'm too young. I need to see the world first. And so I not dropped out. I took some time off of college and bought a youth hostel card and a rail pass and went backpacking alone through Europe, enjoying one last adventure before settling into the domestic routines of marriage. While I was traveling around, I visited about 30 different countries, including North Africa. I was in the youth hostel in Amsterdam when I got a postcard from Steve, and it said, just had a couple of words on it. It said, "I have become a Baha'i." That's the first time I heard the word. I had no idea what it meant. None at all. And so I asked the people in the youth hostel in Amsterdam, what's Baha'i? And they said, oh, those are those crazy people who go chanting in the streets selling incense, and they shave their heads. And I thought, oh my gosh, what has happened to Steve? He was so smart. He was a class valedictorian. He had straight A's through high school. He was student of the year at MIT. He was brilliant. How could he have been so stupid and fallen for something so strange and weird? And so my plans for marriage were canceled immediately. I kept traveling around and had several more proposals because I used to be cute. And then I realized that I was still in love with Steve, and I decided to return home and knock some sense into his head. So I arrived back in Los Angeles and was really surprised to find that he was acting like a normal human being, and he still had all his hair. So for months and months, I ignored his attempts, very patient and kind attempts, to introduce me to his newfound faith. And although he never pressured me, he never said, you know, you have to look into this, you have to read this. I could sense how important it was to him, and I knew that sooner or later he would have to make a decision. And so I grew impatient and I forced the question, who do you love more, God or me? And the answer came back with no hesitation, God. He said, I love you, but I am a Baha'i. And I had no choice left but to read the Baha'i writings in order to disprove his faith. And I knew he would come to his senses once he realized all the errors and the contradictions. And so I went through every Baha'i book I could find, at least 15 books, in a very systematic manner. I went to the library. This was before we had internet and email. I had to look through old archives and microfiche at the time, translate old newspaper reports, look at ambassador testimonies. And I noted down, I'm a little bit crazy this way, but I noted down in columns pros and cons, prophecies, if they were fulfilled, checking dates, looking at old maps, verifying historical facts. And after almost a year of investigating this faith, I was furious because I could not find any contradictions, and everything fit together. Everything was logical. It made sense. So how could I possibly talk him out of it? I was really, really angry at that point. So the next step was to read all the holy books of all the other religions. I mean, I wanted to be fair, right? So I studied the Buddhist scripture, the Old Testament, the Bhagavad Gita, the Christian Bible, the Quran, the Book of Mormon, Jehovah's Witnesses, Adventists, vegetarians, chanters, meditators, Moonies, which was a popular group at the time, and any other thing I could find. I enrolled in a comparative religions class at my university. I attended a retreat for born-again Christians with my friend. I was determined to find something here so I could get Steve out of that strange cult so I could marry him, because I really did love him. Meanwhile, my parents had become extremely upset. My mother could not understand what I was searching for, especially when it made my father so furious. My father would tear up my Baha'i books. He cursed Baha'u'llah's name, which he pronounced Bahula Boob. And he made a special point of observing the Jewish holy days, which is a practice our family had long since abandoned. In order to continue my studies then, I had to read at night under the bed covers with a flashlight. And I had to stuff a pair of pants under the crack in the door so that they wouldn't see the light come in and take my Baha'i books away. Little by little, the words of Baha'u'llah were having an effect. One night when I opened the Hidden Words, which is a small book of Baha'i verses, and I read, "O Son of Man, wert thou to speed throughout the immensity of space and traverse the expanse of heaven, yet thou wouldst find no rest save in submission to our command and humbleness before our face." When I heard that, I knew it was the voice of God, but I didn't believe in God. So how could a human being write with such authority and touch my heart in such a deep way? It seemed impossible to really know for sure. And then I read a letter from Abdul Baha, one of the central figures of this faith, to the Swiss psychologist, Dr. Forel, asking about the proof of God. And I found rational proofs for the existence of a supreme being. So I came to the intellectual conclusion that the Baha'i faith was true, but I could not surrender my heart. And I read some more. "O Son of Love," Baha'u'llah seemed to be speaking directly to me, "thou art but one step away from the glorious heights above. Take thou one pace, and with the next advance into the immortal realm." And still, I could not commit myself. I could not take that final step of faith. And I wrestled with that indecision for months, rebelling against what I knew was inevitable. And if an occasional smile crossed the permanent frown on my face, I quickly wiped it off. And Steve was unable to help me. He could only laugh. Finally, one night, late one night, around 2 a.m, I was frustrated and I was at the end of hope. I had this jihad between my head and my heart, and I decided to do something that I had never done before. I prayed, "Oh God, I may never see the light, but if you do exist, and if the Baha'i faith is really true, the least you can do is let my mother know." Now, I know that was kind of a rustic prayer, but that was the best I could do at the time. A second later, remember this is 2 a.m, my mother was in my room and she said, "Randie, wake up." And I said, "Mom, I am up. What are you doing up?" She said, "I was fast asleep in my bed when the room filled up with light." And remember, I had just been praying that she would see the light. She said, "I have no idea what the Baha'i faith is. I don't know what you've been studying all these months. I don't know anything about Baha'i teachings, the Baha'i history, the prophets, the laws, teachings, nothing." She said, "But I know that it's true." So I had been studying for a year not just the Baha'i faith, but every religion I could find. I had all the knowledge in my head, but nothing in my heart. And when she told me, and this gesture was so symbolic to me, she said, I know nothing about the Baha'i faith. She pointed to her head. And then she said, pointed to her heart, and she said, but I know that it's true. And she said, well, good night. And she left. And so I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. But in the morning, I got up, was really in turmoil the whole day. That night, I looked up Baha'i Faith in the phone book. Again, that was before internet, so look for the phone book, call the phone number. Turned out there was a fireside that night, a meeting where people can go, seekers can go and get their questions answered. I drove over to the fireside and my mother was already there. She was signing her enrollment card just as I walked in. So I had done all the work, but my mother has the honor of being the first Baha'i in our family. So I knew at that point I was going to have to submit, but I wanted more proof. I am quite a stubborn person. Just then, there was a man in the audience. It was a living room, and there were couches all around the edge of the room filled with people who were asking questions about the faith, and there was the speaker who was sitting in the front. And he would say, Baha'is believe in the oneness of humanity, and that we are all brothers and sisters. And this man sitting right next to me would say, oh no, that's just a naive ideal. It will never happen. You'll never get blacks and whites and Jews and Christians and people to believe that they're part of one family. And the speaker would address his concerns and then go to the next principle. Baha'is believe in the equality of women and men. And this guy would jump up and go, oh, that's ridiculous, everyone knows. And every time the speaker explained a Baha'i principle, this guy would jump up and refute it and say how it was impossible. So here was my opportunity. I had found another test for God. I said, silently, I said, if this man becomes a Baha'i tonight, then you can have me. And I was feeling pretty secure at that point. The speaker went on with one more teaching. Baha'is believe in the unity of all religions. And this man jumped up and he was pounding his fist on the coffee table in front of him. He said, I've had it with you Baha'is. You have an answer for everything I say. I can't fight you any longer. I'm gonna join you. I'm like, what? And it was useless to protest any longer. And that moment I said, I surrender. You can have me. And I became a Baha'i. And my heart opened and I was filled with peace and with joy and with light. And at that moment, just after I signed my card, my father arrived at the fireside. He had found us somehow and marched in to save me just as I was signing my name to the card. And that's a whole nother story. My father passed away many years ago, about 10 years after that point. And we had had many, many arguments, even though Baha'is are not supposed to argue about the faith. I was not, didn't do that part very well. And every time I would come home, we were going to school, my husband and I got married to Steve. We were going to school on the East Coast, and every summer or every Christmas, we would come back to California to visit the family. And I would have an argument with my dad about the Baha'i faith. And one day I got a call saying, come home right away. Dad's sick. He's in the hospital and he's not going to make it. So I got on the next plane and he was in the hospital hooked up with tubes and wires and monitors and medical personnel standing around. And he said, I want to die in my home. I have one day left on this earth. Take me home. And we brought him home and we took turns vigiling him. staying with him, and he would fade in and out of consciousness. Sometimes his eyes were open, sometimes they were closed. And I had my guitar which he had given to me years before as a young teenager. And I decided to play him some music. And he had given me that guitar with the provision that I never play any Baha'i songs on it. That was his condition. And I honored that when I was in his presence. But this time was the last time I would see him. And I decided to play a song with the words of the Bab, the forerunner to the Baha'i Faith. I can't sing very well, but I'll try a little bit of it for you. We all come from God, and unto him do we return, like a river flowing back to the ocean, or a ray of light returning to the sun. And I figured technically those were the words of the Bab, so it wasn't a Baha'i song. I was keeping my promise to him. And at that moment, I finished the song. He opened his eyes, was conscious for one more moment, and he said, "Now I'm ready to hear about the Baha'i Faith. Tell me about it." And then he died. And so my thought is, through the grace of God, both of my parents and myself were enabled to see that light. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.